Hello again, and welcome everyone to the Miracles of Tragedy. Before we get started, I want to talk about my daughter's book again here, real quick. Love Lingers Still. She calls it a haunted anthology of lost loved ones, written by various authors with some best-selling authors in there. A haunted anthology of lost loved ones, and my daughter put this together after her daughter ended her own life from suicide a few months ago. And so this is part of her healing process. My healing process is my podcast and talking to people, and that's been so helpful to me today. And I want to welcome back, kind of again, uh, a person that I tried to go live using this new streaming service that I use. I thought I was recording, but guess what? It wasn't recording. We talked for almost an hour, and then all of a sudden, oh, guess what? Let's do it all over again. And I'm excited to be able to talk to her again. Marie Alessi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Again,
I'm
yes.
glad we're recording this time. I can see it.
Yes, it says recording. And it says, yeah, we're a minute and 23, 24, 25 into it. So, yes. So it really is recording this time. So welcome. I'm glad that you were patient with me the last time when I messed up like that.
Of course.
And it's so good to be talking to you again.
Thank you.
And you're down in Australia right now, correct?
Correct. I'm just south of Sydney.
South of Sydney. But you're not originally from Australia, are you? Can you tell us?
No, I'm originally from Austria. So I had this really, really strong calling to move to Australia from a very early age. I remember when I was about 17, my dad asked me what I would like for my birthday. And I said, I'd love to fly to Australia. And of course, I knew we couldn't afford that back then, 5 kids, etc. But it stayed in my heart. And I always kind of felt this is where I belong. It was more than just, hey, check out the country and go for a trip. It was, this is where I belong. It was a really strong calling. And in 97, I flew here for the first time. And I remember this very strong sense of coming home after ages. It really felt like a coming home when I landed in Sydney. And then it took me another 7 years, including 11 flights, to finally move here for good. And I did that in 2004. So yay.
Yay. I've
Finally
always
home.
I've always wanted to go to Australia. And I
There
think
you
I
go.
told you last time that my wife and I actually were planning a trip there when I was flying for the airlines. We were going to do it all
Yeah,
non-revenue, standby. But
exactly. Yeah, we talked about
yeah,
that. Oh my God.
but we figured,
Most of my flights were on my standby and my staff tickets. I remember paying like $200 just taxes return from Austria to Australia. So this is unheard of these days, but incredible. That's why I made it so many times flying back and forth when I worked for the airline. So perfect
yeah,
timing.
but non-revenue with both of us going
Yeah,
and a limited time off just didn't seem very
risky.
feasible. So instead
Yeah.
of Australia, we opted for Hawaii.
Beautiful. Good choice,
And
though.
we've now been to Hawaii 4 times.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
I've only been
twice to
once, but it's
Oahu,
beautiful. Mm.
once to the Big Island, and once to Kauai.
Yeah.
The second time we went to Oahu was taking my granddaughter that I lost last year. We
Mm.
took her to Hawaii when
Mm.
she was 12 years old.
Oh, that's beautiful. So
Yeah,
beautiful. What a precious memory.
it really is.
Mm.
Yeah, it really is. The when we were going to go to Australia, we were looking at, my wife wanted to go to the Sydney Opera House,
Mm.
and they were playing, I think, The Sound of Music with,
Really?
uh-huh. And
Oh my
guess
goodness,
who
that's so
was
funny.
directing it?
Tell me.
Judy Garland.
No way. Really?
Yes. Uh-huh.
That's
Yes.
incredible.
I think
I,
isn't she the one who was in that movie, The Sound of Music?
I would say so, but I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
something. I have never watched The Sound of Music.
I don't know if I've seen the whole thing or not. I can tell you my wife has. I can promise you that.
Oh, yeah. It's usually the first question I get, being from Austria, living in Australia, and it was like, "Oh my God, the sound of music!" And I'm like, "What? I didn't even know about it when I first moved here, and now I realize how big it is in Australia, and everybody watched it, and everybody's gobsmacked that I've never seen it." I'm like, "Wow, yeah, I have not seen it, and I have no intention to."
Well, that's because Ms. Garland is from Australia.
Mm. Yeah.
If that's the person I'm thinking of, anyway. I think.
And it's been filmed in a beautiful Salzburg, where I did my HSC, where I went to high school. So
Oh
there you
wow!
go.
And you're not gonna. You don't like musicals.
I do, but it's just anyway. It's so Americanized. Let's not go there. Completely different topic. It's just yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah.
we started talking last time about
Mm.
um, the loss that you've suffered. You call it loving life after loss, and I do love how that is worded, loving life after loss, because
Mm.
that's something you really have to learn, isn't it? To still love
Yeah.
life after having such tragedy
Mm.
in your life. And
Yeah.
with you, it was the loss of your husband, correct?
Yeah. That was one of them. Absolutely.
Could you go into that for us?
Yeah, I actually want to pick up on something that you said, you've suffered a loss. So I have experienced different losses in my life, and I've actually just this morning wrote a newsletter about how we handle grief so differently, because I have lost all three significant father figures in my life. So my dad when I was 20, then my husband when I was 45, and last year Ottavio, my beautiful father-in-law, passed away. So all three losses were quite significant in my life, yet I handle them very, very differently. And when you
Right.
said suffered a loss, definitely, definitely applicable. When I lost my dad, I don't use the term suffering these days anymore, because I talk about experiences, and what we experience and whether we suffer or not are two different things. And the suffering is really something. Um, I know it's a bold statement to say that, but I feel it's optional. And please bear with me, everybody who's maybe getting, their guards up at the moment when I'm saying this. Yet it took me a really long time and a whole lot of growth and spiritual growth to be able to make this statement. This is nothing that just happened overnight.
Right.
I often talk about the hidden gifts in adversity. There are always gifts in every adversity, yet it takes a lot of healing. It takes opening your
Hmm.
heart and mind to these gifts, and um, it takes also the right moment, the right mindset for you to actually be able to see and receive those gifts, to allow them in, to allow yourself to use those gifts. And there is a whole journey that comes from that. But I want to keep this very much in a nutshell. The hidden gifts that I received through the adversity of my dad's passing, where I was really in that suffering, in the depth of it, the pain, I really had no idea back then how to actually cope with losing my dad. I had not learned how to do that. I did not have the right support system around me. Nobody knew how to deal with it. So there weren't really people helping me through this. And I also felt that I was completely alone in this, because all my friends still had their parents. I felt that, in particular, in my close circle of friends, I was the only one who has lost a parent or has lost a parent to death. And I remember my boyfriend at the time actually reconnected with his dad, who he hadn't spoken to in years. I think it must
Hmm.
have been a decade, after losing my dad, who he got really, really close to. He was like part of our family. We were together for 2.5+ years. And so my dad had become a really strong father figure in his life as well. So he reconnected to his dad after my dad passed away. And I think looking back now, there were so many gifts. That was one of them, that he
Hmm.
reconnected with his dad
Sure.
was one of the gifts, even if it wasn't directly my gift, but it was beautiful to see that my dad's passing had such an influence that these two are now reconnected and still are after all these years.
Right.
I learned to live life very, very differently, to really appreciate life so much more. I learned to get out of victimhood, which was really huge. I was deeply stuck in victimhood and poor me, and how can this be happening to me after my dad passed for probably another 10 years. So it took me a whole lot of self development, different ways of therapy. And I opened a whole can of worms through therapy, uncovered childhood trauma that I was not consciously aware of. So there is a lot that
Mhm.
happened thereafter. But in that journey of roughly 10, 12 years, I went through a whole transition through out of victimhood into enjoying and loving life, realizing the choices that we do have. It's not the choice within their passing, the choice how you react, how you respond to it, that matters the most. That matters not just for your life, but also to all the lives that you touch around you. It makes a huge difference. And one of the biggest gifts that I received through my dad's passing was to never leave anything unsaid when it comes to love. And that was it was like my dad's wedding present for my husband and I. That's how I see it these days. Like Rob and I lived a life with no regrets.
Right.
There was no regrets. When Rob passed, I wasn't left behind with, oh my God, I wish I would have said, or I wish I didn't say, or I wish I would have done. I said
Right.
everything, I did everything that he needed to know that we want. There's always more that you would want to experience, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
the life
Absolutely.
that we did have together, there was no regrets. It was just full of beauty and love and connection. And to me, that was something that I wanted to carry forward, that I wanted to continue to build on. This is what we've built our family on. And just because, and I put this under huge quotation marks, just because Rob passed away doesn't mean that I'm going to rip that base underneath our house. That love and
Right.
connection, the pure joy that we had together, I knew that
Right.
I needed to carry that forward. And I
And
was very, yeah,
Rob was
sorry,
your
go.
husband, correct?
Yes, Rob was my
Okay.
husband. And I was very blessed that Rob and I had a conversation about the what if, what would you want me to do if something was to happen to you? We had this conversation with each other, and we both gave our perspectives to one another. If one of us would pass, what we want the other person to do. And in a
Right.
nutshell, that was summed up in one sentence. Something was to happen to me, I will want you to create the happiest life for yourself and the boys. That's what we said to each other. And we truly meant it. That's what love is. Love just wants you to be happy. And
Right.
that became my North Star when Rob passed away.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Is what is I guess the only way to really describe it is
Mm,
it's that love still goes on.
yeah,
And tell us more. When we talked last time, you told me
mm,
about your experience when
yeah,
he passed. Could you go through that story again for everyone else
sure.
besides me who didn't hear it?
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, on that day, it was in June 2018. I I already knew in the morning that something had happened because Rob was supposed to call me, and that phone call never came. And for anybody who knew Rob, he was the most reliable man I've ever met in my life. When he said, "I'll call you at 7:30," he would ring on the dot at 7:30. And I remember that day waking up at 7:31, looking at the alarm clock, thinking, "That's odd. Rob hasn't
Uh-huh.
called me." And interestingly enough, that day I also woke up at 5:55, and I was awake, not just, drowsily looking at the alarm clock. I was awake at
Mhm.
5:55, not knowing why. I was almost like ripped out of my sleep, and I was like, why? Why am I
Right.
up? In hindsight, I'm absolutely convinced that was the time that Rob passed because, yeah, that phone call never came. And then I started texting and calling, and with no response, obviously. And then eventually around lunchtime, I had this epiphany that I'm like, hold on, Rob told me what hotel he was staying in. He always did that when he was traveling because he was away for work. And I thought, I'm going to give the hotel a call. This is like, this is now beyond what I can do. I've already texted and called him, I don't know how many times. So I called the hotel, and I remember saying to them, this is Marie Alessi. I'm calling for my husband. And I said, please don't think I'm one of those freaked out wives stalking my husband, but I know he's staying with you. And he was supposed to call me this morning and he didn't. And this is very out of the ordinary for him. I'm really worried that something might have happened to him. Could you please send somebody up to his room? And the moment I said those words, I had a split second of a vision of Rob collapsing in a shower. And I remember shaking my head thinking, don't go there, Marie. Don't drive yourself crazy. Don't do this to yourself,
Right.
But because I had this vision, I actually just said it out loud to them. When I said, can you send someone to his room? I said, and can you please get them to check in the shower? In hindsight, I'm thinking they must think I'm completely nuts, to say something like that. But because I had that vision, I thought I'd say it, and that's where they found him. Rob had collapsed in the shower and died there on the spot. He had a brain aneurysm, and it was just instant.
Yeah,
And it took another 4 hours from that phone call before a sergeant finally called me. To tell me that Rob had passed. Their procedure is to send police to you, but we live in such a small country town south of Sydney. We don't have a main police station, so they couldn't get hold of anyone, and they were trying, and then eventually he made an executive decision to bend the rules and call me, because he could see me continuously calling and texting because he had Rob's phone there. He was on the scene basically in his room when I kept calling, and he said, I need to put her out of her misery. She knows something's up, because he was a dad of 2 sons, like he told me later. So I was really grateful that he did put me out of my misery, because there's nothing worse than continuously trying with no answer. It's just,
You reminded me of something that happened to me when my father-in-law was still alive. He had Alzheimer's. And I was out on the road on an overnight in Albuquerque. And when I go to bed at a hotel when I'm flying, I always put my phone on airplane mode at night. Otherwise, my wife, with the difference in time zone, I'll be getting text messages or whatever from her at who knows what hour.
I can
so
relate.
it was like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. And I think, which would have been, the time zone difference is only an hour, so it would have been 4 o'clock in the morning at home. I went up to go to the restroom, and just as I was headed back to the bed, the thought popped into my head, says, turn your phone on. Jean Marie may try to get a hold of you, my wife. And the very second after my phone was active, she called. And to tell me that her father had passed away.
Yeah.
And, things like that
incredible,
do happen.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I so believe in this guidance, that we do have this guidance. And the more we accept that the more we allow that, the more we lean into it, the clearer we hear it. And it becomes such a normal thing. At first I was like, what on earth is that?
Right.
But I felt this extreme, beautiful guidance straight after Rob's passing. From the minute he passed, I knew I was held and guided. I didn't realize it in the moment because I was still in shock, and my brain went straight into functioning mode. I needed to tell the boys. I needed to tell his parents. Telling the boys was really the hardest part of all of it, I have to say.
I can't even begin to imagine what that had to be like.
Yeah. They were 10 and 8 at the time, and I had to tell them, and there is no sugarcoating a message like your dad just passed. You cannot sugarcoat that message. And there was a lot of crying and screaming, and I held them and I was crying with them. And then there were questions, of course, which I answered. My eldest asked me, who's going to look after us now, Mum? And I said, I will. I will look after us.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me months when I realized in hindsight how important that moment was for all three of us, for me to say that out loud.
Right.
And then, you know, after that, I picked them up. We drove to Rob's parents. We shared the news there, which was so heartbreaking. I'll never forget his dad, this primal screaming, you know, of losing your son, and it was
Oh,
just
yeah.
really, really intense. And also that disbelief, you know, when I told them that they had to ask me again, because there's just such a disbelief when you say something like that. It is so
Mm-hmm.
surreal when you hear that. It is so unexpected with somebody in the prime of his life, 45. Rob was so super healthy and fit, you know, but yeah, there was a lot of functioning mode, to be honest, just ticking all the boxes. What's the next step? What's the next step? The flying across Australia to where Rob was to identify his body, the repatriation, the funeral, the walking my little one down the aisle in the same week of the funeral for his first Holy Communion, you know, things like that. It was just intense.
Mm-hmm.
Yet when I look back onto my journey now, I know that I was so guided every step of the way without ever feeling I'm completely unsupported in this. I
Right.
really felt so supported and I couldn't explain why. But now I know because he was there all along. He was just walking the path with me all
You're
along.
right.
I just didn't realize it at the time because I was so in this um, you know, in this human experience of losing somebody versus the
Oh, yeah.
spiritual experience of being with somebody and being guided. You know, it's that completely coexists parallel. It's incredible.
I I really like how you worded it to your sons when they asked
Mm.
you who was going to take care of them. And you
Yeah.
said that you would. You know,
Mm.
there's a lot of people, at least you see in the movies. I don't know how many people would actually do this. You know, they in a
Yeah.
situation like that, they tell the oldest son, says, "Well, you're the man of the house now."
Oh my goodness, no way.
No, I
I
mean,
had to do the complete
why
opposite.
take their
Yeah.
childhood from them? You know?
No. Look, a part of their childhood was taken from them anyway. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
it is, they
but I
really
mean, you don't
had to
want to take
grow
it
up a lot
completely from them. You
faster.
know, it's
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Colin, because they had to grow up a lot faster than other kids.
yeah,
And with my older son, I had many conversations about that, you know, because there is this duality which is not to be underestimated. There is the you're a child, you're 10 years old,
yep,
and yes, you lost your dad. But there is also the fact that because he lost his dad, he now is the oldest male in the house.
hmm,
And that does something to the dynamic. It really does.
right,
So I had to be super mindful and careful not to let him step into that provider role because he was not. Yes,
right,
he was the oldest male, but it doesn't mean that he's now responsible for our family. There's naturally that stepping up as the older brother, the, you know, taking care of him a bit more than he used
right,
to. So there was definitely that bond strengthening, which was beautiful because Flynn and Jed are so polar opposite. They couldn't be any more different in looks, in characters, you know, it's
right.
really incredible. I often got asked, it's like, you sure they're both your kids? I'm like, yeah, don't have to do a maternity test and definitely also not a paternity test. I know that. So it was just, it was incredible to see how their responses, their reactions to their dad's passing was also very, very differently. And there was the time where one wanted to talk about it all the time, the other one didn't want to talk at all, and then they switched over. But there was never a time where they both wanted or didn't want to talk about it, and it was just, it tore me apart for a while. It really, you know, finding that balancing act between the two of them and for the two of them as a sole parent. Before there was Rob, you know, we would
Right.
always tag team each other. We'd always do the switcheroo at nighttime for good nights and all that stuff. You know, even
Right.
even when he was traveling, and he traveled a lot for business, I would hand over the phone so that one could FaceTime daddy while I'm saying goodnight to the other, and then we switched over. So that wasn't there anymore. And you know, when I said how important it was to say that sentence out loud to them, I realized later on that that was the moment when I stepped into soul parenting.
Hmm.
I didn't think this through clearly at that time. I just went with it. You just, as I said, you're in functioning mode. So I just spoke from my heart when he said, "Who's going to look after us?" I'm like, "I will, of course I will." I wholeheartedly meant it and owned it when I said that, not
Right.
realizing that that was the moment when I stepped into soul parenting. And
Now,
that was really important.
you have this loving life after loss. Now, you say that
Yes.
you started a movement, correct?
Hmm. Yes,
T-
correct.
tell us about that, if you would, please.
Well, I'm going to bring it back to your daughter actually, because I love that you said your daughter wrote a book and that was part of her healing journey.
Hmm.
I did the same thing. I wrote a book after Rob passed, and it was a big part of my healing journey. I wanted to share with the world what we experienced. I wanted to share about Rob, how I met him, how I fell in love with this gorgeous man, and how we got married and had our dream life, but then also how he passed and how we dealt with it. I put all of that in that book. It is our story. So for me, it was literally like a download. I wrote and published that book in 4 weeks. And that was the title of the book originally, Loving Life After Loss. That was the title of our story.
Hmm.
And when the book came out, it not only became a number one bestseller, it also ranked in the top 100 of Australia. And that blew me away. I did not expect that. We made it to number
Wow.
61, I believe, and I still remember seeing my book there, number 61 on the bestseller list. And next to me on the same list was Michelle Obama with number 16. And I'm like, "Hey, we're number buddies, 1661, And she came out with her book Becoming on, around the same time. So I still
Uh-huh.
remember it. And of course, needless to say, I bought the book and I loved it. But yeah, that was the start of it all when I realized what a response, what a wave of responses our book, our story created. I thought there's something that the world needs. There's
Hmm.
happiness, there's hope, there's healing. And those are things that people usually don't see or expect in the space of grief. So that was the starting point of it all. I knew I had to do something bigger with that. I had to do something more with that. I knew that this was way beyond just the two or the four of us. This had to go out into the world. And another 5 months later, so it was pretty much 9 months after Rob's passing, I opened the doors to what very quickly became a global movement. And I also called it Loving Love After Loss. I thought it's just the perfect suitable title for it. And
Oh, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's how it all started. Yeah, this is what I do and who I am these days. It really has become my soul mission to heal the world from grief, to show a different perspective on how we can walk through grief. And I originally started with a whole lot of widows in there because this is who I am and who I could relate to the most. But meanwhile, we have widowers, we have bereaved parents, we have bereaved children in there who grieve their parents. We literally have all sorts of different losses. And my biggest shout out to the world is comparison doesn't help us grieve. It doesn't help us
Oh,
heal.
yeah. Absolutely.
We need to hold space for each other
Hmm.
and be there for each other, and just hold space for the opportunity of healing rather than keeping each other stuck in the wailing, in the victimhood, in the poor me, in the this is happening to me, in the my loss is worse than yours. There is no
Yeah.
space for comparison in our movement. I really put a ban on comparison in my group because it's just
Good. Good.
it's not helping us. We need to hold space for each other and provide this space for healing, and that's exactly what I do in there.
Now, your book can be purchased on your website, can it?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
there's a link to Loving Life After Loss. I've also published my second book last year, which is called Happy Healing, which
Hmm.
talks about how the story continued, how we
Oh,
turned it
cool.
into a global movement, and also there's 7 steps that I use in my healing journey from grief to relief. So these 7 steps are in the book Happy Healing as well. I wanted to give the listeners and the readers a bit more of a how to
Right.
and a bit of guidance where to even get started.
Yeah, and there'll be a link to your website down in the notes
Yeah.
on both YouTube and on the podcast itself. So yeah, for those who are not viewing the video but just listening, it's right down there at the bottom. You can see my finger on the audio, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, but in the notes, I will put a link to your website so people
Yeah,
can get
thank
to it.
you.
So now tell us more about this movement and the retreat that you
Yeah.
now have set up.
Yeah. So when I started a movement, I wanted to really share the tools, like the actual tools that I have used, that we have used in our family, to create a focus of happiness and joy throughout the grief. And yes, both can exist simultaneously. It is like, light and darkness, they exist simultaneously. There's no light without darkness, and then it's just so
Right.
incredible when you think about that. Rob was the one who taught me this concept about 2 choices. He always, like, when I had a bad day, he would look at me, he's like, 2 choices, babe, come on, what are you going to focus on today? It's like,
Have you ever
yay.
seen the movie Oh God with Richard Burns?
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah, Mr. Burns plays God in this movie, and he appears to this child, and this child asked him, says, "Why does this bad exist in the world?" And I can't remember what it was he was saying, but why do you allow this to happen? He says, "Well, it's very
Yeah,
simple." He says, "Where
yeah.
there's up, there's down. Where there's in, there's out. Where there's black, there's white. There's always an opposite. Where there's good, there's
Yeah,
bad."
yeah. Where there's fear, there's love.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because it reminds me of the book by Donald Neil Walsh, who wrote a children's book about the little soul. And the little soul asked God, why do people experience pain in their lives? And, why is this possible? Why is this necessary? And he said, probably because that soul chose to learn about forgiveness. So, it is such a
Right.
beautiful, beautiful, simple book. And there was one key sentence in that book that I'm going to share quickly here, because it caused such a chain reaction of healing for me. And there was one moment where God said to the little soul, I only ever sent you angels.
Huh.
And that to me was mind blowing. It
Right.
really caused such a chain reaction where I thought, anything and everything that happened in my life, every person I met, including the unhappy ex relationships, was sent as an angel into my life for me to learn something, to grow, to experience something like forgiveness, like understanding, and the spiritual growth factor is the biggest one in all of it. When you look through that lens in your life, that everything in your life, and I'm going to say this very respectfully, including your granddaughter's passing, including my husband's passing, my dad's passing, anybody else's, was like an angel sent to us.
Right.
And for us, it's there, what did this angel came here to teach us?
Right.
If we look at our lives through that lens, there's nothing but love that we learn from that, rather than why did this happen to me? Because this is where we stay in victimhood. This is where we choose to stay in the suffering, in the pain, which brings us back to where we first started. The
Right.
suffering is optional in there.
Yeah.
And
With me, I those first weeks were horrific.
excruciating. Yeah, I
The
can
worst
only
pain that
imagine.
I've ever felt in my life. And I
Yeah,
rode bulls. I rode bulls for 18 years. So
yeah,
and but as time goes by, there's still pain there,
mm,
but I'm replacing it with other feelings.
mm,
And I'll still have slaps of sadness where I cry. I'll probably have
Mm.
that the rest of my life, but yet I'm seeing now more and more of remembering the love. Remember remembering those fun times with her
Yeah.
and all that she meant
Yeah.
to me, all means to me.
Yeah.
So you
I
also
hear
remind
you. And yeah,
you reminded me of a song, Garth Brooks.
mhm.
Thank God for unanswered prayers. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't. I
Yeah,
need to listen to it now.
if I remember correctly, the song goes that he met he was at a football game with his wife, and he bumps into his high school sweetheart, who he thought, for sure that she was the one, and he prayed for him to be her wife. And when it didn't happen, that's when he goes in, thank God for unanswered prayers.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a
yeah,
different perspective to everything, and
exactly.
yeah, just coming back to your question, when I started Loving Life After Loss, I wanted to share everything that we had to get through these first weeks or this excruciating pain to transform this pain into a different perspective, into what did Rob want for us? And that was, I want you to take the boys and create the happiest life possible. It came back to that one sentence that we said to each other, and there it was. There was my North Star. I didn't know how to get there, and definitely not overnight, but I
Hmm.
knew that that was my direction. And it
Right.
became my soul direction. It became my lighthouse in the darkness, and I knew that whatever I did was to get closer to that happiness that I promised I would create for the boys. And you know, in the movement, I share all these tools. How did we do this? How did we walk the first steps? How can you shift your perspective? I offer people reframes and different perspectives of their very own situation. I teach them how to do that themselves. So I created various healing journeys in there, and I also created programs to get people through that darkness to come out on the other side and really love life again. And my absolute highlight, which I now have chosen as my sole focus in everything I do, are
Hmm.
definitely the retreats, because the retreats are like a 3.5 days
Hmm.
deepest soul connection where people come together into a space where everyone gets it. Because one thing that often holds us back from healing is because we are often in an environment where nobody understands what we are going through,
Right.
and people have this expectation. It's like, okay, this the first 6 months are the hardest, and then there's this 1 year where all the milestones are ticked off, and then you move on. It is absolute BS. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, you don't
And
move
by
on.
BS, I
It's
mean your belief system. It
yeah.
is really like how your belief system was created,
Hmm.
and society, that's what they teach us, the first 6 to 12 months, and then you move on. There is no moving on, there's no
Right.
getting over, there is just a moving forward into continuing with your life after this fork in the road that nobody expected,
Yeah.
because that's what it is. It is a massive redirection of where you thought that your path would lead. Hence the complete disorientation. When things like that happen, you feel disoriented, you feel like you have no direction. Everything's been, because it was such a redirection that you didn't expect, and then you're like, where to from here? Hold on, but
Yeah.
that was my path. Why is that not there anymore? And that is our human experience of all of that, the not understanding why, and the questioning and the searching for where's that path gone. And so often we keep staring at that path that we thought was still there, but it's not. It was an illusion. It was our illusion that this path would lead into that direction.
Yeah.
I
After we
think,
talked the
yeah,
last time,
yeah.
I was talking with a woman who lost an adult child to, I
Mm,
think it was cancer. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah.
but she wrote a book about her experiences, 30 years after loss or something like that. I can't remember the
Yeah.
title, but it had 30 years in it.
Hmm.
And all she was talking about was how she still has these horrific feelings, and it took her
Mm.
30 years to get this far in her healing. I'm
Mm.
like, oh my. I I politely declined to publish that interview because it was just
Mm.
so negative, and
Yeah.
it just made me feel so sad for her that there was
Yeah.
nothing motivating in that she was saying at all.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but to just feel sad for her.
I just want to say my heart goes out to her because I think it is always easier for those who have healed a particular amount. Not that you can ever measure that, but for those
Right.
who have experienced healing, um, to then look back at people and say, "Oh, why doesn't she move on?" And I think all I wish for her is to find the right environment to be able to actually really go into healing,
Mhm.
because what it takes is, first of all, it takes a reframe, it takes a different perspective, it takes oh, there is actually an opportunity to heal. Because without believing that, without opening your heart and mind to healing, you ain't going to see it.
Right.
So if you don't see it, how can you do it? If you don't
Yeah.
see it, how can you allow it in? If you don't allow it in, how can it actually happen? So it takes quite a few different layers. But every people always say, like, this is such a perfect example. 30 years, people always say this stupid, excuse my French here, this stupid sentence: time heals all wounds.
I
Again,
was
that's
just
absolute
gonna say
BS.
that a couple minutes
Absolute
ago. Yeah.
BS.
It's
What
baloney.
belief system has created that? you know Intention does. Your intention heals your wound. If you want healing, you will find a way. If you want healing, you will
Mhm.
open your heart and mind to that possibility. And once you do that, you can then decide to move forward into that direction. You can then decide to allow that in, allow the right
Right.
people to support you. And
Absolutely.
that supportive environment plays a huge factor in whether you do or don't heal.
Yeah, the last time we talked, I mentioned a gentleman that I interviewed who was a war veteran in
Hmm.
Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and he used his veteran benefits to go to college, and then
Hmm.
a master's degree in education from
Yeah.
Harvard University. He
Hmm.
called himself the most tattooed person to ever
Hmm.
graduate Harvard.
Oh, I
But he
love it.
now lives, yeah. But he now lives in the Dominican Republic,
Hmm.
and he says he moved there because of nature,
Mm.
and that nature is such a wonderful way to heal and
Yeah,
to connect
I
with
couldn't agree
nature,
more.
and then you started telling me about your experiences of places near your home, and I
Hmm.
loved those
Yeah.
stories. Please repeat that.
I don't know any particular experiences I shared now. I can't remember, but I love that. I live right in the middle of the national park. So I'm looking out the window and everything is just juicy green and there's huge butterflies flying around everywhere. It really looks like paradise out there. I love it. And so I love going out into nature. There's a 10-minute drive to a little waterfall that I love
Hmm.
going to. It is
Yes.
my little place of serenity. I've actually came up with a new word, which I call serenity, because I went out there. The energy is so beautiful, and there's this serenity, and
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
oh, the
yes.
serenity.
You
Is
came
that
up with
is
that
that
the
what you
last time
meant?
we talked,
It
serenity, and
must
I
have been
forgot.
that day actually, because it wasn't that long,
Yes,
and I think
I
from
tried to tell
memory it
my
was
wife,
that
and I
day.
couldn't remember what it
Yeah.
was. Serenity. Yes, yes.
Serenity. I love it. Yeah, it's my new word. I absolutely love it. And I love going out there because it is so serene. The nature is so beautiful. It is so quiet. And I love going out there to reflect, because mostly when I go out there, all on my own, and it's just really beautiful. I take my boys out there too. It's a different energy, obviously, when I take my boys with me. It is more about play and being present, which is so beautiful too. And then there is a place. There's also like a reflection place for me that I really love going to, and it's called Bald Hill. So it's at the northern end of the Illawarra region. The Illawarra region is south of Sydney, and it's
Okay.
literally where the whole south coast starts. And you sit up there, and there's a lot of hang gliders that jump off there. It's a perfect cliff for hang gliders, parasailers, all that stuff. And there's a little level above that where it's usually a lot quieter, and you can just look out to the ocean and all the way down the south coast, and it's just the most stunning views up there. And it is also looking down to the beach where Rob and I got married. We had our barefoot wedding on
Oh.
that beach, so I really just love that beach, and I spend a lot of time there. We spent a lot of time there as a family. Often,
Hmm.
after Rob came home from work, we would just drive down, have a picnic there instead of dinner, and just love, love, love the beach. This is one of the main reasons why I moved to Australia. It was just, it's absolutely beautiful here. Yeah, I love it. I feel that Mother Nature is our biggest healer, really. When you don't feel
Yeah.
great, walk outside, put your feet in the sand, in the grass, whatever nature you have around you. And even if you live in the biggest city and can't get to nature, like even just having a huge poster or on your screen a picture of luscious nature already helps, even just looking at it, if that's your absolute last resort and you can't
Right.
get to nature. But in every city, there are trees. Go and hug a tree. Seriously, I mean it. I'm a confessed tree hugger. I love it. You get so much energy from that, and it's so calming. Just make sure you don't get ants all over. Check the tree before you hug it. Check whatever you hug before you hug it.
Yeah, and there's something about beaches too. That's one
Yeah.
reason why my wife and I love Hawaii is,
Mm.
you know, I don't like going into the ocean because I don't
Mm.
want to become a part of the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, I
I
hear you.
Yeah.
And
So,
that
but
that sentence usually comes from people who didn't grow up around the beach. I'm one
yeah,
of them. I didn't grow up around the beach. Rob grew up around the beach. He felt so safe in the water. He was a pure Aquarius. Was diving, spearfishing, snorkeling, surfing, you name it. He had no fear of the ocean.
yeah,
Respect, yes, no fear. But I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
you won't
So,
find me too deep in the ocean either.
but sitting, relaxing on the beach, there's just
Yeah,
something about that. Whether you want to go in the water or
absolutely.
not, there's
Yeah,
something about that serenity,
yeah.
that serenity.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's
Yeah.
I just love that. And
I really love it too. Just the sound and the smell and the feeling of sand under my feet is just beautiful. I really love it.
mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, then also this veteran that I was talking about,
Hmm.
he was mentioning nature walks and how they can reduce your stress levels.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he finds places all over the world
Hmm.
to do nature walks. And he says there's a
Yeah.
place in Japan that is
Hmm.
specifically designed for people to lower their stress
Hmm.
on these walks. When you
Yeah.
start on the walk, you're hooked up with probes, that measure your heart rate and
Hmm.
your bodily functions.
Yeah.
And there's things that you do on the walk. I'd have to look it up or listen to that talk again.
Mm.
And but it's just he says that at the end of the walk, you get to see how your body is blood pressure and all these things
Yeah.
have been back to healthier levels.
I can only imagine. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would imagine if you went on and did an internet search for nature walks in Japan or whatever,
Mm.
something would indicate, mental health. I don't know.
Yeah.
And you could probably find those. And that would be
And they've
it'd be
got such
really
beautiful
interesting to
nature
learn more
too.
about that. Yeah.
Mm,
I'm gonna have to
yeah,
find that and just learn more about it so I can talk more intelligently
yeah.
about it. Well, Marie, I just I love your your fantastic attitude. You know, you've
Thank
suffered,
you.
you know, you've had a lot of pain in your life. You know, I can't imagine what it would be like for me to lose my sweet Jean Marie. I couldn't even begin to imagine what that would be
Mm,
like.
mm,
But the way that you've put things together for yourself and your sons is such a motivating story for me, and I love that so much. If anybody's out there, just who's suffering, no matter it could be a spouse, a
mm,
child, a parent, a grandchild,
mm.
somebody really, really close. There is loving life after loss.
Yeah.
And one thing and that's something else I say a lot in when I'm doing interviews on somebody else's podcast, and also on this, is in today's world, so many people are feel there's no hope in the world. When I
Mm,
since we talked, I've gone on to let me bring that internet site up so people can see it. It's QPR
mm-hmm,
Institute, and
mm-hmm,
it's about how to deal people, how to talk to people who are suicidal.
mm,
QPR: question, persuade, refer. And
mm.
they say not to do anything like, "Oh, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you?" I mean, you just say it point blank.
Mm.
Are you considering suicide?
Yeah, yeah,
Or have you had thoughts of just not waking up in the morning even?
yeah,
Question them, and get them to open up to you and just listen. And then
yeah.
comes the P, persuade. Persuade them to get help and then
Mm,
refer them somewhere, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, a religious leader, or whatever, somebody who's going to give
yeah.
them the help that they need. And so
Mm,
there's a course on qprinstitute.com, costs $29.99, and you can
mm,
become a certified QPR gatekeeper to where you can talk
mm.
to people and help them. This program has saved countless lives, countless lives.
Yeah,
And that's something that it's one thing I started going there because of the word hope.
yeah,
One thing that everybody who's ever considered suicide, has tried suicide but failed, or who has killed themselves, they all have one thing in common. They feel that there is no hope for them in whatever
yeah,
situation they're facing right then at that moment.
yeah,
And I'm here to tell you that even with what I've been through, the loss of my oldest daughter, the loss of almost seeing my grandson die on a hospital bed after a car accident when his father was killed in it, and the
mm,
loss of my granddaughter to suicide, hope still is there. Love and hope are so much alive in this world.
yeah.
And I think you are such a living testament of that.
Thank you. I
You
really
are,
appreciate that. And I think it is so beautiful that you did bring this up because I too sat in a course, in terms of how to respond to suicide at the very beginning of opening the doors to loving life after loss. Because not that I wanted it as another certification, but I wanted it as in seeing the signs and what do you actually say? How do you actually respond? And I think it's really, really important. And if there's one thing I got out of this entire course is that we need to name things as what they are. Ask this question directly. Are you
right,
considering suicide as your option? And we do not talk about suicide, grief, death enough. We don't.
Right.
And it's important to bring these conversations up, but rather than, staying stuck in the field of pain, of suffering, we need to learn to open up with a question and hold space for people and actually listen. We are
Exactly.
so quick to, oh yeah, my such and such husband passed away too. I know what you feel. No, you don't.
No.
You don't.
Yeah.
And I know now that people mean well, that people want you to feel that they understand you. Yet the best thing you could ever do for somebody who has experienced a loss is sit with them and listen. And if they don't
Absolutely.
want to talk about it, just sit with them. There's
I
no need to say anything.
After my oldest daughter died of cancer, it was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks after her death, and everybody just felt very awkward around me because they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I was in McDonald's doing some reading on my iPad, and Facebook instant message came across to a person that I used to go to church with in Missouri that I haven't
Mm-hmm.
seen in I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
And we just chatted, just normal
Mm.
everyday stuff. Hey, what
Yeah.
are you doing now? Yeah, I'm doing
Mm.
this. And here's where I'm living now. Just for probably an hour. It was the
Mm-hmm.
first time that I felt normal
Yeah.
after her loss. Then he says, I do know your situation.
Oh,
I've been
wow.
there. He knew exactly what I needed.
Oh, wow. That just gave me
Yes,
goosebumps all over. That is
because
so beautiful.
he lost a
So
child and
beautiful.
he knew that he'd been through that awkward situation, and he
Yeah.
knew just needed somebody to talk normal to me.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
I love that. I love that because so many people do become awkward around you and don't know
mhm.
what to say, what to do, what to ask. And just treat me normally, please. I don't have a
Yeah.
disease. It's my
So
husband
for
that passed. Yeah.
so for anyone listening, if you have somebody close to you who has lost somebody near and dear to them,
Mm.
just be there and listen. Just say,
Yeah.
I'm here for you if and when
Yeah.
you need me,
Yeah.
and just listen.
May I say something to that, Colin? Because I think that will be super helpful for your audience. So often people don't know how to offer help in a way that it can actually be accepted in on the other side. The number one, and I'm going to call it straight out as I feel it, the number one mistake that people make when it comes to that is this sentence: call me if you need anything, whatever it is, anytime.
Okay.
People never do that, ever, not once. So here's what you can do instead, and I'm going to keep
Okay.
this super simple.
Let's do it.
Instead of call me if you need anything, whenever you go, I'm going shopping today. Send me a list of things that you need and I'll bring them. Or, hey, I'm going to cook for you next week. Do you prefer Tuesday or Thursday? Okay, Thursday comes. Hey, I'm going shopping for dinner tonight. Do you prefer pasta or fish? Make it direct, offer something that can be helpful, and keep the choices super simple. Give them two choices: today or tomorrow, fish or chicken, shopping or cleaning, sitting or talking, walking or movies. Give them, like when you sit with them and ask them and they have no answer, they don't know, it's because they are in this deep situation where it's really, really, really hard
Yeah.
to make sense of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Be gentle with them and offer them simple choices, or just sit with them. Yet
Hmm.
I can promise you that give me a call if you need anything will never happen. I've been told this sentence so many times, and even I was not able, and I'm saying even I because I had done so much growth and so much healing and so much work on that, and still I wasn't able to just reach out and tell people, hey, I need you. I needed people to come towards me, come to me and tell me, do you want red or green? And I could say, oh, red would be nice, please.
Or
But me
if
reaching
that
out,
person lives a great distance from you,
yeah,
call them.
yeah,
Especially with
yeah,
technology today. I mean, we can, like,
absolutely.
we're having a video chat, get
Yeah.
on a live video chat with them and just be there. It's not as good
Yeah,
as,
if you think
right
of a
there,
person,
but
just call them. You don't have to have any
yeah,
answers. You don't have to know
exactly.
how the conversation goes. Just call them and say, hey, I was just thinking of you.
Yeah. Just,
That's a
hey,
good conversation starter.
I've sent you a link to your email for a video chat. Let's talk.
Mm, mm,
And
yeah.
that gives
Reach
them
out to the person.
exactly.
Mm,
Once again, Marie, your input and your thoughts and your hope and your love of life after loss are so inspirational. And
thank you, Colin.
I appreciate you being with me once again after my failed attempt on StreamYard before. I think that
Who
was only the
knows?
second time I used it. So
There was definitely something in this conversation why it had to happen a second time. So it's all good.
it was great. Thanks again. And folks, please watch for another episode of The Miracles of Tragedy.